about to hear a revolution in talk radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
And welcome to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. This broadcast is being brought to you live on Thursday morning, January 8th, 2015. It is now 8:01 a.m. Central Time in what was once known as the good old USA. Well, folks, you know, it's time for us to take back control of our government. Now, before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. During our live broadcast, we invite you to call 646-652-4620 or toll free 888-773-4496. Before we get started, I would also like to remind our listeners to subscribe to our reminder service by going to our website and clicking on the subscribe icon button. All right. For those of you who Twitter about our our Twitter address is @LibertyJoe. Well, good morning, everyone. This morning we have a guest. Our guest this morning is Jim Robinson. Jim Robinson is a Tulsa resident. He's an old friend of mine. We met many years ago during the frenzy, I guess you would call it, of the 9/11 Truth Movement. And Jim sort of became one of the head people in the Truth Movement and held monthly meetings regarding what the government was doing and what they were versus what they were telling us. And it became very interesting. We became good friends, and over the years, Jim is a Tulsa entrepreneur and keeps up on all of the current events. And today I asked him to come here because I'm going to discuss with him maybe some old subjects I'd like to resurrect because they remain unresolved. Okay, Jim, thank you very much for being on our program this morning.
Joe, thanks a lot for inviting me. Happy to be here this morning.
Okay, well, you know, you're going to be you're our guinea pig this morning. You know that because you're the first guest we've had in our new studio, and we hope the microphones are working and all that. Can you hear everything through your ears pretty well?
Everything sounds great. Let's give it a
run. Okay, good. Well, one thing that gnaws at me, Jim, is whenever you mentioned 9/11, the incidents that occurred at 9/11, people become very emotional. They don't want to talk about it, and very rarely, if ever, have I had anyone ever want to actually discuss that incident in American history. They either, most of the time, they dismiss it, call you a nutcake, or refer to you as a weirdo for thinking that whatever the government told us is not true, and if you take any other stance, you should have psychiatric evaluation. What I find strange about that is that same person will tell you, if you ask them, has the government ever told you the truth? They would say, no. Or at best they'd say, well, a lot of times they lie, or most of the times they lie. But when it comes to everything that has been told to them regarding what occurred at 9/11, the government, I think, did a great job of indoctrinating the public in thinking that whatever they say is true. Now, all of it may not be true. Some of it may be true. And even those people who take the opposite point of view may not be accurate because no one really knows. I suspect that, like Pearl Harbor, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and all these other catastrophes or conflicts that we were engaged in over the years, it seems like there's a 40 to 50 year span, and then the truth comes out. Then all the books come out and contradicts everything that the government had told us about that incident. Now, I know you're not very active in the total truth because it's waning. I mean, it's you mentioned 9/11. People, please, it's like saying World War. How about the Civil War? It's like ancient history now. What is your take on that?
Well, Joe, first of all, your comments are very astute. Anyone who studies history would find that almost every war, whether it be initiated by United States or another country, invariably can trace back to a false flag event or a suspicious event that could have been false flag. And like you said, many times it takes a generation or two before the truth comes out, that information is revealed, and people can digest and accept it. The events of 9/11 affected our country and people individually on many different levels. It was, they talk about our air raids in Iraq being shock and awe, but I would say that when the towers went down, that was shock and awe to the American people. And we were all a feeling of helplessness and disbelief. And so when the media people immediately started pointing to bin Laden and what terrorist group would do this, we were very fragile emotionally and psychologically, and very few people at that time could sort through the facts from the fiction. And like you said, United States government did an excellent job with the propaganda and embedding in our mind that there's this boogeyman out there and an organization that would want to attack us. And the sad truth, there was I think Herbert Hoover had said a quote about if an event is so monstrous that it's even harder for people to disbelieve it or believe an alternative theory if it's just so unbelievably monstrous and devastating. So the sad fact is people are stuck in belief systems, and they get fed this propaganda, and it's hard for them to wrap their head around the idea that there could have been an alternative theory or truth to the events, and to think that there could be criminal elements within our government. Immediately people say, oh, well, you're saying that George Bush, blew up the towers. Well, no. It's much more complicated than that. And the idea that there could be criminal elements within our government that could have been involved in, or at least let the event happen, again, a lot of people, as you said, don't want to even approach the subject.
Yeah, it was interesting. Just a few days ago, I met one of our tenants here. Wonderful people. One is an airline pilot, a 757 airline pilot, retired. And I said, well, being a pilot, I have to ask you about how a 757 flies. And I said, I understand that they had interviewed several pilots and said that it was impractical or impossible to fly a 757 50 feet above the ground because there was no lift. Now, this guy's a pilot. He says, oh, no, he says there's actually more lift at 50 feet than there is at higher altitudes. Now, I did not disagree with him, and I'm sure he wasn't lying or whatever, but there must be something technical that I don't understand, or I'm asking the wrong question. And I said, well, what I found strange is that, that the Pentagon, which is the most heavily fortified building or structure in the world. I mean, the Kremlin should be is so fortified. Really, it's more fortified than the Kremlin. And it has satellite surveillance 24 hours a day, multiple satellite surveillance, where they contend that they can read someone's license plate if they drove across the Pentagon. There are 3 layers of security, air security, and it goes on and on. I'm sure the camera system, they didn't pay $29.95 on sale at Radio Shack.
Although the video that they showed us of this white blur hitting in 3 seconds hitting the building looked like a Radio Shack camera.
Oh yeah, if that, I have a Radio Shack camera. It was much better. Now here's the interesting part. Here's the interesting comment, and this is what our listeners must really understand. And these fellows were genuine. They're very nice people. They're genuine. They really believe what they say, and I'm not criticizing them. Don't get me wrong. And if they're listening to this broadcast, I apologize. I don't mean to criticize you. I'll not mention your names. But one said, oh yeah, I know someone who actually, or has a friend that actually saw the plane come into the Pentagon and actually shave off the treetops, etc., before it hit the Pentagon. Now, I don't dismiss the fact that his friend said that to him. But then you have to ask yourself the question, if his friend saw this plane 50 feet above the ground, this is in a very populated area. Why did not, I'm not talking about 100, why hadn't 10,000 or maybe 100,000 people say, 100,000 people come forward and said, I saw this plane skim over the top of my house. Not one person, but there is one person who says, I saw the plane. It actually chopped off it trimmed the treetops before it hit the Pentagon, but there's only one person in that entire heavily populated area who saw that. And so I didn't say anything. I said, but that can't be plausible, because if that was the case, you would have 100,000 people come forward in the newspaper saying, yes, I was there, I looked up, I saw the plane, I can see the numbers, the engine was on fire, whatever the case may be. This is what happens on every other incident where there's an aircraft in an unusual situation before a crash. You have thousands of people coming forward saying, this is what I saw. Right. No one has come forward except for this friend of a friend who saw the plane chop off the treetops.
And Joe, your point's well taken in that it's been proven throughout history that eyewitnesses to any event, an airplane crash, a murder, whatever crime it might be, that eyewitnesses, even with good intention and trying to be truthful in their answering of the police questions of what they saw, have been mistaken, either in the identity of a person in a lineup or even in the description of the events of what happened. In the case of the 4 planes that were supposedly hijacked in 9/11, there are conflicting reports from eyewitnesses, probably in the case of what happened with all 4 of those planes, particularly in the case of the Pentagon crash. So there are witnesses that talk about that they did see a plane, that they didn't, that there was a missile. So it's difficult to sort through eyewitness testimony and take it for truth.
I want to take the opposite approach from it. Now, I understand that I'm sure people listening say, why are we talking about ancient history? Because ancient history is current.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely current. It is as pertinent today, if not more so pertinent today, than it was when the incident occurred. We have a government. If the government in fact did lie, and they lie about mostly everything, and everyone would agree to that, even government officials would agree that, well, we don't tell the truth. Everyone tells that. Then we have to be suspicious of our entire form of government, that we do not have a democratic republic, that we have something other than that, maybe an oligarchy, and we're just being led like blind sheep. I forgot my point.
Well, Joe, one of the most important, no matter how much minutia you want to get into the events of 9/11, and by the way, there are literally hundreds of anomalies that contradict the official story that simply don't add up. But the message from that, because we might never get the full truth or bring closure to that, is that everyone should be vigilant and skeptical of what their government says and does, and to be cautious that we really are a warring nation, have a war economy, and that all it takes is an event, is another false flag, an event that is perceived as an enemy attack to launch us into another war, potentially World War III. And the American people need to wake up and be aware of these tactics that governments use, and be ready for the next event.
That's an excellent point, Jim, because I think the point that I was going to make that I almost fell out of my head was the fact that if in fact all these occurrences during 9/11 took place the way the government claims that they did, that means every single facet, the military, the security, every single facet of the government, the information situation, the airline security, every facet of the government failed. Now, why don't we talk about, let's assume everything that occurred is exactly the way the government claims it did. All right, that means that the government got a absolute 0 on the report card. They had a chance to make a 3 or a 4 or a 10 or a 15 or a 30 or 40, 50. Even, failing with a 50 wouldn't have been bad. They got an absolute 0. All of the jet planes, all the jet fighters were taken out of service, all on some exercise. All 4, divisions of it, all at the same time, all off the East Coast. They could have been ICBMs coming in. We wouldn't have known about it. I mean, which is ridiculous. Obviously, that's not the truth, in my opinion. So every aspect of the government failed. So let's assume they were telling the truth. Isn't it the same? Saying, all right, you told the truth, but you're an absolute 0. We can't trust you, not because you don't tell the truth, but because you're incompetent. So either you are absolutely incompetent, or you're the biggest liar in the world. Now, to me, if I was in the government, I'd say, I can't win this. But they have convinced the public, for some reason, that they're right on both accounts. That's what drives me nuts.
They tried to explain it that, we goofed, that there was miscommunication between different divisions. And, oh, by the way, we just happened to be having rather simulated war games that tied up most of the NORAD jet pilots that morning, just coincidentally.
Jim, if my wife ever finds me in bed with like 4 or 5 gorgeous young girls, and say, oh, I'm sorry, honey, I made a mistake. I'm going to see how she forgives me. You think she'll be okay with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, she'll be forgiven. We all make mistakes, dear. Can I get you a cup of coffee and a few cigarettes? I mean, it's so ludicrous. And when you mention this, when you mention the subject, people become so emotionally detached that you can never get to the subject, the conversation that you and I are having. Because they walk away, they argue. You never get past it's crazy, man, it's stupid,
right.
Don't do crazy, man. I go, it doesn't make any sense. I just want it to make sense.
Right, you people lose all rational thinking because of how emotionally intense that event was, and to even have the thought that there could have been some evil conspiracy hatched within our government that contradicts the official story isn't what people want to hear, and they're so emotionally torn and twisted over it that critically thinking and rationally discussing it is something that very few people can come to grips with.
Right. Hold on a second. Let's just stop for a real quick break, okay? And we'll be right back, folks. Don't go away. We got a lot more to come.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Branch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires. For a free consultation, call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
Folks, this is Joe Cristiano. You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. We're back here with Jim Robinson, Tulsa entrepreneur, and I guess past head honcho of the Tulsa Truth Movement. I've known Jim for many years, and we're talking about a subject that most people find abhorrent. They don't want to talk about it. They're emotional about it. There's no logic, and that is 9/11. But it's not so much what occurred on that fateful day on September 11th, 2001, but the government's response and how its response is very consistent with the response it has been giving us for probably decades, if not a couple of centuries. You know, Jim, how about the Lusitania? I mean, here's a case where the Germans actually put ads in the major U.S. newspaper saying, we know the United States is carrying arms on passenger ships against the Geneva Convention. If we see a passenger ship come across this particular area, we're going to sink it. I mean, they were telling people not to get on. What did the United States do? Did they say, hey, you know, even if we're not, you know, let's not let that ship leave because we don't want people to die? No, they squelched that, let people go on. Ship was sunk, you know, and by the way, the Germans in that case were, I mean, they weren't right, but technically they were correct, right? People died, we go into World War, right? And I said, how many times do we have to go through the Gulf of Tonkin incident? Never occurred.
Totally fabricated.
The Spanish-American War, fabricated. Every single one was fabricated. There was not one. Now, people argue Pearl Harbor. There are plenty of books out now that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt with government documents, not historical opinion or anything, government documents that prove that we knew that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor, the reasons why we forced them to do that. They did not want, they knew they were going to wake up what they called a sleeping giant. They knew they were going to lose the war. But yet, all of this is discounted. It's, we're good, they're bad, God bless America. It pisses me off, excuse me, especially.
Well, me as well, Joe. It's, you know, war is a racket. It's just tragic, the millions of people that have died and suffered over wars over the last century and prior. And sadly, not just in America, but throughout the world, so many leaders are psychopaths, are power hungry. Let's face it.
You mean like me, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And governments typically want to gain control and power over their people. They have sometimes plans to expand their empire, and to make people feel dependent on their government, and that they need to let the people think that they're protecting them and keeping them safe. So there always has to be a boogeyman, an enemy. You know, we've throughout post World War I and II, then we entered the Cold War, where we had to have our government protect us from this evil communist empire, Russia, and then. Again, recent terrorist attacks. Now, brown people in the Middle East, you know, want to kill us because of our freedoms. And it just, again, if you study history and look deep into the facts, you'll see how effective this propaganda has been.
Well, they do an excellent job of propaganda. Whenever I get into a conversation about war, and you know, one of the organizations you and I belong to, every once in a while this subject is brought up, I have an answer. My answer is always the same. I say, follow the money. And it shuts everyone up because they know if they follow the money, they would find the truth. I think people are afraid of the truth, Jim.
No doubt. And whether it's our involvement over in Iraq or whether we're sending troops to Somalia, Americans have this perception that we're good, they're the bad guys, that they're doing this to protect us from these evil terrorists halfway around the world. And again, the propaganda has been incredibly effective, not to mention that most corporate-controlled media fully jumps on the bandwagon and fully supports and endorses the government's position as well. There are not many alternative views and people that challenge the position of government, and that's why we need shows like yours to help people at least wake up and think critically.
You hear that, folks? Listen to Jim and obey him, okay? But, you know, I watch Russian television, RT TV.
Oh, so you're one of those communists.
I'm a communist. You know, well, and the reason why I do that is because they have a guy who's on there who's, I guess would be a socialist. I mean, he's not a socialist per se, a hardcore socialist, but he's like a progressive, if you will, which is a quasi-socialist. But they're also those people who are classical liberals, you know, libertarians and whatever. And there's this mix And then they have them all together and they have the boxes, with each person in there, and they discuss issues on a sane level. You can't see that. They will have a Ron Paul. They will have someone like that on our TV. But Ron Paul will not get invited on the major networks. I'm not saying that everything that our TV is not somewhat filtered and cleansed and maybe homogenized in a way to prove a point. But it certainly gives you a broader scope of what is going on. They show film. They have people on the ground, in Gaza, in Israel, in Syria, in Ukraine. We don't have that. It seems like all of our journalism now is all done remotely, and we don't see anything. We just hear how bad things are. What I really thoroughly enjoy is when I hear our president talk about the fact that we have ended the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, although we're sending more troops. Exactly. But they're not really troops. They're training. They're there to help. They're a humanitarian aid. We send tens of thousands of troops there, and most of them, are not even troops. They are subcontractors. They're contract troops, right? And they get paid $100,000 a year, each one of them. They get all these supplies. And you think to yourself, you want to know why we're $18.1 trillion in current debt, and in unfunded debt? If you read what Professor Kutlakoff at the University of Boston, who's been a guest on my show that I'm going to have back as soon as we get, on our remote system set up. 3 years ago, our unfunded debt, according to his calculations, was $223 trillion, $250 billion. Now, if you just look at our debt right now, my wife and I owe the government $997,234 as of yesterday. That's how much. Now, we have no debt at all, except for government debt. We owe the government $1 million. My wife and I owe $1 million. And, by the way, so do you. I just want to let you know. I was going to send you a letter. And no one is saying, wait a minute, I owe the government $1 million. I didn't buy anything. I didn't go to war. I didn't want to do this. But in fact, you did, because you supported what the government wanted to do. Instead of saying, hell no, we won't go, we said, God bless America, and we thank you for your service, which really hacks me off, because they're not serving their country, they're serving the banking community, and it just hacks me off, or the military-industrial complex, however you want to look at it. And I don't,
Well, there's so many thoughts and responses I could give to what you just shared with me. One, of course, is that we have a broken political system. The corruption, the cronyism, and criminality runs rampant throughout Washington. There's a revolving door between high appointments and cabinet positions in government and the leadership in the Wall Street banksters and government contractors. The backroom deals that are made. Let's say, as I mentioned earlier, we have a warring economy, and I believe well over half of our government's budget is apportioned to the Department of Defense and the Pentagon budget, and we rely and need that to keep our economic engine running. It's rather tragic. And then, as you mentioned, I too have a lot of sadness and regrets regarding the military today. I feel sorry for them. I think they're misguided. I think they've made a poor decision by volunteering. Without a volunteer army, there would either be no war, or they'd have to reactivate the draft, which I think then there might be protests and resistance.
That's what happened in Nam. When they said, "Hell no, I won't go, but you have to go." No, I don't have to do anything.
So our government learned from Vietnam that the issues that brought that war to an end was one. Embedding journalists into the front lines so we could see the blood and gore and body bags that I remember as a child watching TV in the late 60s. Two, that they had dissent and resistance from many religious leaders in the 60s, and they've got them on their side this time around. And then three, they've gotten the media to simply parrot their points of view. So they have control of the media, the religious leaders, and are very careful about the journalism that we get to see back from the front lines.
Do you know who I blame for that?
No, who?
Parents. No, you would think the parents would have learned from Vietnam, would have learned from Korea, would have learned from all of these conflicts, all right? And even this war in Iraq, which everyone knows now was bogus. Then their son, in the past 5 years, let's say, says, I want to go in the army, I want to serve our country. They go, oh, son, we're so proud of you. I mean, where are the parents saying, hey, Johnny, what did I raise a numbnut? You know, these guys are, the parents haven't learned a thing.
Right.
Because our parents are not responsible for the kids. They're not responsible for the kids' education. Put them to government internment camps called schools or something like that, right? And then if the parents are not even permitted, there'll be a day where the parents are not permitted to educate their children. I mean, even in conversation, or give their children an opinion as to how things really are. There's going to be a law someday saying that anything that a parent tells a child regarding government must first be approved by your councilman or something. I mean, and it sounds crazy, doesn't it? Right? It's exactly where we're going. Because, well, actually we're there because they're not even giving their opinion. They're saying, Johnny, you go in the army, I'm going to smack your nose off your face, you know? And here's the 20 reasons why. But the kids go, and what happens? Most of them come back. You think they come back all patriotic? No.
Yeah.
Most of them come back either dead, injured, handicapped, mentally deranged, or depressed that they ever went there in the first place. That's the majority of them. And yet, no, we learn from nothing.
I agree. And again, we speak about propaganda. Every war and every conflict has been glorified as we're the good guys trying to make the world a better place. And sadly, military enrollment oftentimes is a family generational thing where my dad or my uncle served in the Marines and I'm going to because this protecting our freedoms and serving our country, little cliches that lead people to believe that they're doing good, and it really is tragic. And like you said, so many come back, if not in a body bag or physically injured from an IED explosion. They come back with PTSD, and the beyond the human tragedy, the VA cost to provide medical treatment and psychological treatment for these tens of thousands of soldiers coming back from these senseless wars is, again, just adds to our national debt and further burdens our country economically.
Now I'm going to become almost conspiratorial at this point.
Oh, don't do that, Jay.
Well, I mean, I just wonder whether or not, we had some callers on here. I wonder if they wanted to ask a question. Folks, I'm sorry, I have not been looking at the board. And if you do want to call and ask a question, please call back. It's 646-652-4620 or toll free 888-773-4496. We have about 10 more minutes, so please do call and ask a question. I'm awfully sorry. I just noticed that some people dropped off, and I don't know now whether or not they wanted to ask a question. They hung up and discussed because I wasn't looking at the board. Okay, I shall do that. But I wonder, we have a situation where we have an economy where young people can't find good jobs. But the Army, the armed forces will say, come in and we'll train you to become a electrical engineer or whatever the case may be, or computer programming or metallurgy or something. You say, wow, I get a free education, right? I get fed and I get paid for it, and all I have to do is sign up, right? They sign up and they're sucked in the system. Now, those that are a little bit smarter than the others will go something like into the Air Force, and then they go in the Air Force, they'll go into mechanics or something like that. So they're on the base fixing the airplanes while the other airplanes are taking off, killing themselves, And so there are smart ways of doing it. But a majority of them, they go into the Army or the Marines, right? And bingo, they find themselves in some desert place. What I find interesting is that, could you imagine, they say, well, they hear because they hate our freedom. Could you imagine people in a third world country like Afghanistan, which is just a mountainous dust bowl, people getting up in the morning whose only objective is to be alive by the end of the day, to have enough food to eat for themselves and their family, to not be injured by their environment. In other words, make it through the day. Forget about making money. They have no money, to have enough food so they don't starve at the end of the day. Could you imagine while they're resting, maybe by campfire or whatever, or their stove at night, and have a friend over saying, hey, Abdul, let me tell you something. I've been thinking, I hate America, and now I don't know where it is, because they couldn't find it on a map because they've never seen a map, right? But I hate their freedom. How about you and I go to America and kill a lot of people? Hey, that sounds awful. Now, could you imagine people who are eking out, the most subsistence living that you could imagine, that being a priority in minds?
As you position the story, that's totally ludicrous to think that someone who's trying to provide for a family, a farmer, a sheep herder, a local merchant, to have, even if they were intelligent enough to try to understand United States and world events, to have the wherewithal and capabilities to think about forming a terrorist organization or buying a ticket to America to inflict harm is just outrageous. I mean, if there's a billion Muslims in the world and they talk about the radical Islamist people, there are so many soft targets out there that there could be bombings and shootings and terrorist attacks on a daily basis if there truly were these evil people that wanted to harm us. But your point's so well taken that the only thing that is starting to impact, I think, and create and help promote terrorism, and one of their best recruiting tools is the drone bombing that we're doing in Pakistan and I believe in Yemen and other countries. Like I said, they have no contact with America, know little or nothing about us, but all of a sudden, if American drone planes are flying overhead and blowing up suspected militants, and gee, sorry for the collateral damage, or sorry if we blew up a wedding procession when we thought it was a terrorist meeting, it's no wonder that more and more people in those faraway places hate America. But to think that they could actually be organized, plot, plan, and come over and do destruction on our mainland is very far-fetched.
Yeah. What's interesting is that people say, look at those savages. They came here and they drove airplanes into our building and 2,300 people got killed. And yet we can go over there and bomb an area, kill mostly innocent people, and maybe a suspected, even if we hit kill the suspected, it's only a suspect, unconstitutional as all get out. We can kill dozens of people and do this on a day-to-day basis, and yet we excuse that. Just like we excuse the fact that the government has never told the truth, but when they tell us something, we believe it. Now, I think, quite frankly, I'm going stark raving mad. I don't understand a thing that's going on. I don't understand the American psyche, the American logic, the American anything. And when we say, God bless America, I go, no. God correct America. God heal America, not God bless. Because he blessed America, and we did a good job of screwing the whole place up. If we're going to say God bless America, we say, God, please correct America. Get us on the right track, not bless us. In fact, scold us, if anything. But when you say that, they say, oh, I'm anti-American, I'm anti-God, I'm anti-this, I'm anti... Well, yes, I guess I am.
Right. And to that point, when we spoke about the suspected militants of our drone bombing, in a recent press conference, the media actually challenged our government as to what do you mean, or could you define suspected militant? And you know what the answer was?
No, I have no idea.
A male of age to serve in the military. A male of military age is a suspected militant. So, the bombs away.
But what's interesting is that even young children, when overseas in these countries that we occupy, are really militants. I mean, they want them out. And I don't blame the kids,
Exactly.
And yet we have soldiers that are just, they're like RoboCops, and they're fighting these kids that are throwing sticks and stones at them. Doesn't that tell you something? This is not the German Panzer Division coming at you at all. This is some kid who has nothing, absolutely nothing. Man, I don't even have any more parents because we killed them already, or someone killed them, and he's throwing stones at a soldier because he's angry, because he's hungry, because he doesn't want foreign people in his own village, and he's the bad guy, We have to watch out for those little kids, Oh, come on.
I hear that the new movie American Sniper, I hear it's an excellent, well-produced film, but I absolutely will not see it because on principle that having one of our soldiers over there as a sharpshooter and as a sniper, picking off even kids and women who were used as pawns to carry explosives, whatever, just is in conflict with my morals and values. So I would refuse to. I would boycott that movie, even though it may be an excellent film.
Yeah, and I really wish we would, even Hollywood would be more realistic.
Well, we like to glorify war. It's we're again a warring nation throughout our history. As you know, we've talked before about the history books and regarding the westward expansion of our country. 300-400 years ago, and what we did to the Native Americans. We have a bloody and ugly history of violence.
Maybe that'll be our next topic. That we came here, we took the land from someone else, and then we draw an imaginary line. Then we say, if you come across this line, you're an illegal immigrant. I have a problem with. My mind doesn't work that way. My mind it has to be linear, and it's got to be logical, and it has to have substance. In other words, and it cannot violate basic human nature, inalienable rights, which don't apply to the United States, apply to everyone in the world. It's a law of nature. You don't take land from someone and say, now if you step over here, I have the right to shoot you. I'm sorry, Jim. I think I'm at the point where not much I thought I was learning things, and I think what's happening is I'm unlearning things, and I'm getting more skeptical and dumber by the minute. Because every time I hear something, and people say, oh, Joe, you're so negative. I'm not negative. I'm questioning. It's like if you question, you're negative. If you have an opinion, you're negative. But if you agree and you go along with everyone, you're a positive person. That's the most negative position I can think of. Anyway, but
just don't forget, support our troops, Joe. Support our troops.
Oh, that's right. Support our troops. Right. And the thing is, not that I don't support our troops. I want to support. I want to go over there and say, hey guys, what you're doing isn't too smart. And I'll bet once you go over there, if you went there, well, when Obama went over there, he was almost booed out. By the troops himself. But before we leave, we only have a couple of minutes. There's a new movie coming out, isn't there?
Oh, yes, there is.
Why don't you tell us about it?
Yes. Well, I only know just a little bit of the premise. Are you speaking of the Shadow Ring movie?
Right.
Yes, a movie that Joe and I personally know the producers and the production company, Free Mind Films, is releasing by the end of March a indie film called Shadow Ring, and it's going to expose the truth and go in depth about the CFR, the Council of Foreign Relations, one of the secret societies that has tremendous influence in the global events. And that movie will be out at the end of March, and we'll get a little bit more detail about where to access it and its distribution. But I'm excited for the company, and again, I think it's going to be great to expose to the world the influence that this
and the narrator is.
The narrator is Kevin Sorbo.
Sorbo, right?
Who was
Hercules,
who was Hercules in the TV series,
okay.
And has also been involved in a lot of faith-based films. A very very popular actor.
Okay, well, Jim, thank you very. Oh, by the way, in interest of full disclosure, Jim and I are minor investors in this movie because we know the people and we decided to kick in a few bucks. So we want to say that, but we have promoted their other films and we had no interest in it at all. So I feel good about that. Jim, thank you very much for being our guest. I do hope you'll accept our invitation to return at a later date.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Very good. Well, here we go. This is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. With that, until next time, I'm Joe Cristiano. This is Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well, stay tuned.